was supported by the National Science Foundation, and in 2015, his research was cited on the NSF website. Professor Chatterjee has given research seminars at universities around the world, including UC Berkeley, Stanford University, University of Pennsylvania, Georgia Institute of Technology, London Business School, the Israel Strategy Conference, National University of Singapore, and Indian Statistical Institute, Delhi. He has also consulted for the World Bank and the Competition Commission of the Government of India. His inputs were cited by the Niti Aayog, India's Central Planning Authority, in a 2015 report on innovation and entrepreneurship policy for the economy. At IIM Bangalore, Professor Chatterjee has engaged in extensive teaching, creating and delivering courses at various levels at the PhD, MBA, and economic programs, executive education programs. These include Rise of Asian Economies, Economics of Innovation and Growth, Laboratory of American Industrial Organization, Management of Technology and Innovation, among others. In 2015, he conceptualized and chaired the first India Conference on Innovation, Intellectual Property and Competition. This was the first of its kind international innovation policy conference in India. His deep passion for democratizing education has resulted in the first ever MOOC on healthcare markets in India in 2016, which is available through the IMB edX platform called IMBX. Over to you, Professor.
So I'm not used to take a corner in the room and chat. I usually roam around with my students in the classroom. But thank you so much, Kavita, for a kind introduction. Today we have an interesting opportunity to present in front of you findings from a study that we have been working on over the last few months. My co-authors Neil Shah and Tarun Pathak have joined me in this effort with some very novel data on the Indian mobile phone markets. I just want to set some context on this particular report. Basically, the initiative comes from my interest in what is happening to innovation in India, for which I had given some inputs to Niti Aayog. We know that the mobile economy has a huge multiplier potential for India today. And we also know that this has been true even in a world when smartphones hadn't diffused in the market. There's a seminal economic study by Bob Jensen, Harvard economist, who looks at Kerala fishermen and shows how their lives in the markets improved once they adopted mobile phones in matching their hauls to the local coastlines markets. That was in 1996. 20 years down the line today, we live in a smartphone ecosystem, and we also know over the last 10 to 15 days with demonetization, a lot of cashless transactions happening and people moving to mobile phones. So the point is that where are these mobile phones coming from? And should we also not become self-sufficient and technologically independent, not just in consuming phones, but also in manufacturing these phones? And that's exactly the goal of our report that Tarun, Neil, and myself have tried to document with evidence, not just hearsay. So that's basically the premise. We have a bunch of reports. I think I will hand over to Tarun and Neil to share, to just give you some prelude to the report, and we'll officially share the report soon thereafter, followed by which we will have an August panel from the mobile phone markets and the broader complementary infrastructure ecosystem, with whom we will have a panel discussion. There's a small bit of unfortunate news I received as I arrived at the airport, which seems Mr. Kant is sick and he cannot make it. But we are trying to still source some inputs from him so that we can share it with the press. In his place, Ms. Aruna Sundararajan has given us a word. I'm constantly dynamically on the phone to get her here. She is in a meeting and she promised she is trying to come. So hopefully she will be here in the next 45-50 minutes and she will be able to release the report officially for us. And we take it from there, and we also have a little bit of a slot allotted for question and answers. With that, I will hand over the dais to Neil and Tarun and request them to share some of the findings of our study, and from there we can move on as the day progresses. We also thank the entire media friends of ours for coming over and joining us today morning on a Monday. Please join us for lunch once the session is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirantan. So I'll just in the next 10 minutes, we'll try to go over the findings or the highlights of the report and see how we set up the context for the discussion and for the panel discussion. So to start with, let me start with putting India in context of global handset market. So if you look at in the past 2 years, there has been a lot of excitement when it comes to India. And when we talk to a lot of component players, suppliers, there's a lot of excitement when it comes to India as a market, especially mobile phone market. So if you see some of the trends here in the past 1 year, from the growth perspective, India is one of the fastest growing mobile phone market in the world. Not just a mobile phone, it is one of the fastest growing smartphone market in the world. If we compare it with some of the countries like China, US, Brazil, Indonesia, most of them are growing at single-digit growth, but India is the only country in the world which is like growing at double digits. So what does that potentially mean? It is already the second largest mobile phone market in terms of user base, smartphone user base, and this also presents an opportunity for each and every player in the mobile ecosystem to get value out of it. So to put it in a number context, almost 1 billion smartphones will be sold in India in the next 5 years, and further segmenting it, this will put an opportunity of close to $80 billion of components will be consumed in India in the next 5 years. So $80 billion is a huge number and greater than some of the GDP of most of the countries, emerging markets. So how we are positioned, how we are placed enough to get this opportunity out of this 80 billion component market to make sure that we reduce our import bill and localize most of these operations. So let us start with the current status, how we are positioned right way as we talk in 2016 when it comes to the current state of manufacturing in India. So for the past 2 years, like if you look at, there are a lot of traction happening when it comes to Make in India, from almost 2 units in 2014 to almost 50 units have been set up in the past 2 years. And most importantly, if you look at the import contribution, that has declined from 86% to 33% when it comes to the import of mobile phones in India. So that's a significant number if you talk about comparing the past 2 years and the number of units which have emerged in India. And to further look at deep diving and segmenting these units which have come up in the last 2 years, we can see that almost 13 states are now competing as compared to the mobile manufacturing units which have come up. So this is good in a sense, like it has encouraged like states to get in a competition mode to capture these component ecosystem players to come into their states through the effective policies and everything. So there is a sense of competition within states also. Right now Noida is leading with almost 15 units, and almost 75% of these units have come from Indian OEMs, followed by Chinese with 10% and 10% Taiwanese. So one of the interesting fact here is we have almost 170 mobile phone brands in India, and out of them almost 109 are already localizing. So it's like they are manufacturing phone through their individual route or through the contract manufacturing currently here in India. So that's a big number if you look at the 109 units. So this is brief mapping of each and every mobile phone unit, either through their contract manufacturing route or either through their own route, how they are doing it. And this number looks good on paper. We had seen of 180 million phones being assembled in 2016. Everything looks good. When we compare it with the world economies, like if we look at some of, there are close to 7 nations which are manufacturing mobile phones in their respective countries, and India's GDP growth out of them is the fastest. So how we are going to leverage on this fastest growth? So if you look at the value addition, the current value addition right now in India is still at 6%, and that is also one of the outcome of our research as compared to the economies like China, where value addition is almost 70%, as compared to Vietnam, which is almost 35%, and then Brazil, which is 17%. But the Indian value addition still lies at 6%. So what is the next phase? How we make sure that we should drive this 6% to to 20% to 30% and compete with the global economies like China and Vietnam in coming times, because there has been a lot of competition within nations with respect to the mobile phone manufacturing in coming time. So regarding that, I'll hand over to Neil. Could you discuss about the next phase, like which are these components and what we have recommended in the form of like phase approach for the next 5 years in coming times. Thank you.
Thanks, Arun. Thanks, Shiratan. So that was a good context on where India is in terms of the opportunity which lies for not only the manufacturers but the entire manufacturing ecosystem, right from OEMs to software developers to component players. So what we have done is trying to estimate what the actual local value addition is to the overall manufacturing in India right now. So if you look at the overall cost of a phone, it is very important to look at the cost of a phone, what constitutes the total percentage of the cost of a phone. That will give us a really good idea on what we can localize here, what we cannot. So if you see, the PCBA is the heart of the phone, which has all the microprocessors, memories, and silicon components. So that is one of the toughest component to manufacture here, because we don't have a silicon fab here to churn out ICs. But if you look at, there are many other components such as housing, battery, chargers. All those collectively can contribute to 6 to 17%. Are very much low-hanging fruits which we can localize it right from component level, module level to even sub-component level, sourcing raw materials. Followed by display and camera, which is a mid-level thing where you need some semiconductor components, some fabs to manufacture display, display is like 17% of the total cost of a phone. So this is normalized across all the price bands in India and across the total percentage of components going into the phone. So in India, for example, 2016, total almost $11.6 billion worth components are going to be used in overall mobile phones, out of which we are just localizing just $650 million worth components, including the assembly cost. So that's why what we are proposing here is a phased approach on which component which are low-hanging fruit, we should start localizing soon, and the initiatives should come from the manufacturing ecosystem as well as government to have prudent policies to attract the suppliers. So already government has started having differential duties for some components like accessories, batteries, chargers, but that is still at a very much SKD level, which is called semi-knockdown units. You can still import internal components and assemble it here, but not entire sub-component list is being localized here. So the depth of the value addition needs to go further. So the phase one, what we are proposing is the battery, charger, cable, accessories, which could take the overall value addition from 6% to 17%. But the main component in which phase one, what we are proposing is the industrial design, the PCBA design and PCBA assembling to happen in India, because the industrial design, PCBA design is the crux of the entire phone. If you are a manufacturer and if you are a design-led manufacturer, that is a complete different thing compared to the manufacturer which just sources components or sources the phone directly assembled in China or some other geography. So that is what separates players like Apple, Samsung, and to the rest of because they are more of a design-led company. They have their own industrial design. So that is what we, the entire manufacturers which are not doing that right now in India should do. One is industrial design, then is housing design, and the PCBA design, and PCBA mounting and assembly, which can be done locally. The phase two is the next phase where we are proposing displays and camera modules, which corresponds to almost 30%, 17 to 30% of the total BOM cost, which can take the overall value addition to almost 8 almost 32% by end of phase 2. But again, not everyone will localize every component. There will be still being imported because we need to have technology, intellectual property development as well in India, which to drive 100% value addition. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyways, I'll continue. So the phase 1, as I said, let's summarize again the low-hanging fruits, the components which are housing, industrial design, focus on design, developing R&D expertise. That should be the next, for the next 2 years. Most of the OEM should invest in, and government should prompt the companies to invest in. Then followed by display, camera. That will be the next phase. And through 2020, we are expecting the value addition should reach 32% if all these are localized, at least not only at component level, but at some sub-component level as well. The phase 3 would be more of a distant thing where we would like to have semiconductor fabs in India. It will take at least 10 years for India to reach at China level, where the value addition is 70% because they have their own fabs. And still, the number of fabs are still rolling out in China, and their silicon import bill is actually more than the oil import bill. So they are also doing conscious effort to attract foundries, and we should not stay behind for post 2020 to have silicon fabs and have key silicon components, which I said almost contributes to 40 to 45% of the total cost of the phone, to take the value addition beyond 50%. So just giving an example of how we can switch from semi-knockdown to component knockdown. So right now, all these parts for a charger which goes into a phone are being assembled but are not necessarily sourced locally. Many of them are still imported. So most of those components still can be sourced locally. So there should be a policy reform where it where it encourages the manufacturers to do a component level, sub-component level sourcing as well as manufacturing right here in India. Similarly for PCBA, as I said, the silicon sourcing will still happen. It will be in form of imports because we don't have a fab. But the PCB, which is the main PCB on which the silicon is mounted, that can be sourced locally, as well as the PCBA design, the design efforts going into designing a PCBA, as well as the assembly. So that can have some contribution to overall value addition because the overall cost to a phone is almost 55% for PCBA. Similarly, in phase 2, a display fab is really important because display corresponds to 70% of the total cost of a phone. We need a display fab, and already there are plans for a number of players to invest in display manufacturing locally. That will drive value addition considerably. So we expect by 2020 at least 50% of the phones sold will have local sourced display. So this is a chart where we have analyzed almost for this research almost 60 components which constitutes a phone. And if you see by 2020, the number one contributor, what we estimate would be a PCB in terms of total value addition. Almost $600 million worth PCB will be going into almost $20 billion worth components in 2020. So PCBA, display, camera, housing, and the overall design of a phone to be localized remains the key thing which manufacturers need to employ, as well as government has to have policies and reforms to drive that local indigenization. So if we are successful in localizing these components in the phased manner, I think our overall total localization amount over the next 5 years will be $15 billion combined out of the $80 billion components which are going to go into the phones in the next 5 years combined, which will take us a value addition to almost 32% by the end of 2020. And with fabs coming in, semiconductor fabs and more display fabs coming in next 10 years, I think we can take the value addition to almost 50%. So just to reiterate the steps, which are the critical steps which will boost the localization. So the step one is already being achieved very handsomely with the Make in India program, where we are already doing SKD level, semi-knockdown unit level assembly. The next step would be to source and do CKD level, transition to CKD level assembly. Already accessories, charger, battery packaging is being manufactured here, being assembled here, but it needs to be sourced locally. The next step, the step 3 is critical, where industrial PCBA design and should be in-house, or at least there should be some design houses which needs to be attracted to open their shops in India, which will drive the small players who doesn't have capabilities to have their own in-house R&D and design. The next step, as I said, display, fab and camera will also give you a next good localization boost to the economy. And we can at least start with the SKD level display and for camera and move on to CKD level display and camera. So overall valuation can go above 30%, and which would be very close to what Vietnam is at right now. So the obvious benefits are, from economic perspective, are jobs. So we are estimating almost 150K or 1.5 lakhs jobs to be created in 2020 alone, which will be more spread out not only from manufacturing operation perspective, but also other industries like software, R&D as well. And these are direct jobs, what we are talking about. The indirect jobs would be more than 1 million if we have this entire component ecosystem set up by 2020. The other benefits which would, for the overall mobile ecosystem, would be not only for suppliers and manufacturers, but also for consumers, because once we have localized most of the components, get the overall logistics savings, the incentives which government can give, the overall differentiation which manufacturers can have, and the quality they can control because they are manufacturing it locally. That will give a really good overall value to the mobile phones and to the consumers, because that will also prompt lower prices. Good because of it is done locally. You don't have any import duties to take care about, and again that will drive innovation as well, because more of the manufacturers will start investing in their own intellectual property, design, as well as different services which they can localize sitting here in India rather than in China or Korea. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Neil. We just received a note that Madam Aruna Sundararajan is on the way, so while she's making to the hall, maybe we can open up to a couple of questions, though we do have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the panel. So we can take some couple of questions right now as we wait Madam to come and release the report officially.
How competitive will India become in terms of price after, once the localization, once we achieve 50% of localization by 2020?
Already in terms of price, it is quite competitive, but the overall, as the smartphone users become more mature, the sense of going for a higher end handset would increase further. So the higher the costlier the handsets, localizing it would be much more prudent, as well as have good price impact. So for example, Apple, for example, right now is not manufacturing in India. So already it charges 10 to 12% extra compared to other manufacturers who are manufacturing in India, right? So that can be passed on to consumers.
So it's the cost benefit is about 10 to 12% every manufacturer.
Yeah, it depends on the government policies on what are the differential duties between the import versus realization.
I also want to mention that it's not just about price. So today morning when I was picking the flight and coming from Bangalore, the Indigo lady made an announcement that if somebody has a Note 7, please keep it outside the flight.
Yeah.
So you want to be also conscious about the quality of the phone even at the lower end of the pyramid. So this horse race that's there between price and quality of the phone needs to be carefully thought through as we think about how it might benefit the bottom of the pyramid market.
So most of these companies, mobile manufacturers, they are actually manufacturing or simply assembling parts.
So right now, most of them are assembling at a semi-automated level. That is what it is.
What
But that,
percentage of total
most of them are. Only a few, like Samsung, for example, they have a process because they are here for almost a decade now. So they are doing at CKD level. Many manufacturers, Indian manufacturers, are also planning to move to CKD level. They are already setting foundation for that. So we might expect some to do next year or so.
We have a panel and Vikas is here with us from Micromax, so I think we'll get some very focused feedback. And Marek is also here today. So thank you so much, ma'am, for making here at a short notice and on a busy day. She has to leave in 10 minutes to the parliament for some other requirements. So why don't we release the report and maybe she can share some thoughts and then we can continue our discussion. I'd just like to introduce ma'am a little bit from what I could gather from the internet. So ma'am, hopefully I'm factually correct. She's known for her work in Kerala with e-governance. She's currently the Secretary of Electronics and IT. And she was also playing a seminal role in the Digital India Vision team of Prime Minister Modi. When I learned about Mr. Khan not being able to make it to inaugurate the report, he specifically recommended that Aruna ma'am will be the right person because she's now handling electronics and IT. Thank you so much, ma'am, for coming and spending a few minutes with us. We have the report in front of you if you want to unribbon it and release it for everybody. And then Christy will come and share some thoughts. May Christy will come and share some thoughts.
Professor Chirantan Chatterjee, Mr. T.V. Ramachandran, other dignitaries on the dais, friends. At the outset, I should say that I actually came hoping to listen to the presentation because more than anyone else here, I think I would have been one of the keenest persons to know what exactly are the findings of the study and what is the kind of set of suggestions that are being made here, because I think this is a very important and integral part of the policy making. So I do hope that you will share the presentation with me. I think, first of all, I must commend the IIMB for coming up with this study at this time, because as you may know, 50 units, 40 new mobile manufacturing units and 10 component units have come in the very short space of almost a year and a half, or less than 2 years, ever since Make in India was launched. Now this is certainly extremely good news at one level, but it also indicates what is the actual opportunity ahead. And I think the presentation would perhaps have highlighted to you that the scope for creating value in India has barely been touched. So how do we actually move from a situation where there is about 6% value addition all the way to countries like China, which have nearly 70% value addition? Because we need local jobs to be created here clearly, but we also need value and we need IP to be created in India. And that is the direction in which we have to go. For that, it's a complex ecosystem that needs to be created. We have some elements of the ecosystem which are getting created and are being put in place as we speak. But there is a long way to go before we can claim that we have a mature and comprehensive ecosystem which will actually enable us to do three things. One is service the Indian consumer. And as you know, today we might have anywhere between 250, 270 million smartphones, of which the report I think says about 180 are getting assembled here. But we still have to move to 500 million smartphones, or eventually to universalization of smartphones. Because as we know, the smartphone is today, for India at least, it is an instrument for leapfrogging many of the challenges that we have had in the past in terms of accessing financial services, but in terms of accessing a number of other services, identity services, in terms of accessing e-governance services, in terms of accessing developmental services, whether it is skilling, financial literacy, digital literacy. A number of new services are actually being developed, which are being accessed on the mobile, all the way down to entertainment and other kinds of new age services that are coming up. So we'll clearly have to work on several fronts. We will have to work on creating an appropriate tariff regime which can actually encourage this movement towards value addition. The first thing we all do recognize is that it has to be a phased and calibrated program, because clearly nobody can move from having value addition of 6% to 20% or 30% overnight. It will have to be built organically. And for that, several actors, several stakeholders will have to come together. So tariff is one part of it. How do we build the skill sets required? And in fact, we have launched with the DIT. So the DIT is working on several of these areas. I'll just indicate what these are. Clearly on the skills, there has to be a great deal of work which has to be done. There's a huge requirement of people, but we have little depth in the market right now. So in all these areas, whether it is Noida which is coming up, or Andhra Pradesh, or around Bangalore, or some of the other rural areas in India, we need to see how skill sets can be built. So we need to work in association with the industry and the sector skill councils to build the skills. Then design capabilities. How do we build design capabilities? And in fact, I'm happy to mention that the very first program which the Ministry of IT is funding along with a section of the industry, whereby 100 Indian designers are going to Taiwan. It's a 3-month program. They are actually going to get complete exposure. These are middle and higher level management people from industry who are going to go through a structured program which is being organized along with the Taiwan manufacturing industry to see how they can actually, to see what is the kind of skill sets available there and come back here and we kind of train the trainers programs so that we can train a large number of people. So design capabilities, skill sets, the tariff regime, in addition to that, the creation of good quality infrastructure, the electronics manufacturing clusters where this can be manufactured. Plus, I am sure that there will be a lot of interaction which will be required with the Indian consumer market because the requirements here are quite different. And it was very interesting for me when I had gone to Taiwan just a month ago, where they said that some of these Taiwanese companies, if you look at their depth of understanding of Indian requirements, they actually have teams sitting here with farmers, with rural artisans, etc., to try and understand what is it that the Indian consumer is looking for. And then they build that into their design. And their knowledge, I think, is far superior to anything that I have heard here. So all these are areas where we will have to work on. Local industry, we need to have a strong partnership between government, local industry, and the other segments which play as the industry associations, the supporting organizations. So with these few words, let me once again just say that I'm really very grateful to Indian Institute of Management Bangalore for coming up with this very important study. I congratulate them for this, and I do expect to see that we should be able to embed many of their policy recommendations into the set of policies that we hope to bring out in the coming months. Thank you very much.
So this anecdote that you mentioned on sending engineers to Taiwan is very commendable because there is economics research to show how, for example, Bangladesh has become a textile hub. You don't know this, but Desh Textiles, which is one of the earliest proponents of Bangladesh's comparative advantage in textiles, sent 100 such engineers to Daewoo in Korea to train them with textile knowledge, and they come back and spawn the entire entrepreneurship and innovation activities. So we can immediately send, in fact, my professor at Carnegie Mellon has theory on this, which builds basically nano-economics, economics at the people level, how do you endow implicit skills. So thank you, ma'am, for that great story, and that really rings a bell. We have a small little bouquet for you, ma'am. So with that, we can go back to the Q&A. But before that, we have an August panel today, and as per the agenda that we had originally planned, let's start with the panel. And for that, thank you so much, our dignitaries from Elsina, from Broadband India Forum, Qualcomm, and Micromax for joining us today. Maybe I will let them introduce themselves in one sentence by themselves, and then we take over for the panel discussion around this particular thing. That's okay.
Hi, I'm Vikas, one of the co-founders of Micromax.
Yeah, this is Parag. I'm looking after government affairs for Qualcomm in India and South Asia. T.V. Ramachandran. I'm president of the Broadband India Forum and also chairman of the Telecoms Council of the European Business Group.
You all know me, so I'll do my thing.
Hi, I'm Devashish Chaudhary. I head Encina's Bhiwadi Electronics Manufacturing Cluster.
This is Tarun Pathak, Senior Analyst with Counterpoint Research.
So thank you everybody for your time today. Maybe we can, we will try to keep the panel short and we can then segue into the lunch. Maybe sir, if you can start with some thoughts on the context that we have under which we got motivated to do the report and what Madam Aruna also shared about the journey that needs to be calibrated and we have to go forward in making it a mobile first, welfare enhancing economy. So opening thoughts.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's been a great privilege to listen to the presentation and be part of the launch here. From Broadband India Forum, I tend to look upon these not as smartphones, but as broadband devices. And if you take that perspective, we do have a long way to go. We may have 1 billion connections, which is just 600 million maybe of unique users in India. And if we want broadband to percolate like we wish for the growth of India, then we need to have 1 billion broadband devices today like mobile devices. So whatever is done to make that happen will benefit India, whether it be 1.4% of the GDP growth or the common man's impact in everyday things that he does. I would like to go back to 2005. A similar situation was there at that time. And one of the big things that kicked off telecom in a way then was, at that time the government was presented with a report. I happened to be associated with that too at that time. It was a report by OBA of England. And that showed that great things were happening in telecom, growth was fantastic, potential is very high and all that. But much of the value addition is actually going out of India. That hit the government like a solid hammer, and that's what spurred many of the things which subsequently led to the sleeper-in-the-door ecosystem, etc., many manufacturing activities. See, now, everything has to start in a modest way. So today people tell me that smartphones are only being assembled, not really manufactured. I take it, fine, that's how we start. That's how China started sometimes. But we have to quickly move to the next phase. And that's the beauty of the work which has been done by IMFB. They are talking of a phased approach. From what was probably 6%. About a year ago I was told it was 1-2%. Today I'm happy that it's from 6%. So we need to accelerate our phased growth to prevent the value addition going out of the country. And while you may say smartphones are finely priced, I would tend to disagree. If we want 1 billion smartphone devices, broadband devices to happen, the prices have to come down further. And that can be made possible only through more of local manufacture, local design, local R&D. I think the incentives for making that happen are the means that we have to explore today. So I think the studies are very contextually relevant now. I compliment you all on that. I think, like Madam Aruna said, this is only scratching the surface. I think we need to go a long way, and all efforts need to be made. Parties like Micromax have really put India in the map of the global map, the way you started on manufacturing and doing things. But we look to you for also accelerating to the next level. Just a couple of thoughts.
So actually I was going to ask Vikas that if you can share some thoughts on how to move into the value addition phase as Micromax, and where do you foresee opportunities and what are the challenges you foresee both at the company level and at the policy environment level?
Thank you for this opportunity. So I think, as it's a popular adage, a good start is half the job well done. So compliments to the government of India, to the think tank in terms of making this policy of Made in India. As Sir also said, and Aruna also said, this is just a start, this is not the end. But from the industry side, what I can assure you is this is something that the entire industry is very confident about and are looking at putting more and more investment for the Made in India setup in India. Now, as we move, just to give you a backdrop of what Micromax is doing, we currently have two facilities, one each at Rudapur and Telangana, which are completely operational. And between the two of them, we have a manufacturing capacity of 3 million units a month that we can do over here. Telangana has just gone operational about 4 months back. We also have a third one, which is in Rajasthan at the BYD cluster, which is coming up. Hopefully, next 60 days should see that also getting started. But as rightly you also pointed out, these are right now pure assembly setups. So what we are doing is we're getting SKD and we're getting them assembled. But what this has allowed us to do is now we have a more better control over the industrial design. So I have a team who's designing the products now in-house. So we don't look at hiring a third party who does the design for us and then we take that into production. So more and more now the molds are getting to India, and these what Neil also said about the A cover and the B cover being assembled in India, that's something that we've started. We are also on the verge of importing our first set of CKD lines. Now, just for the benefit of all the media people over here, I'm sure most of you know, but there are two common terminologies, one of which is called PCB, which is actually a printed circuit board, and the second, which is called a PCBA, which is basically the assembled PCB. Now, what happens is PCB is that small wafer green thing that you usually see, probably a micro millimeter kind of a thickness kind of a board. And once the components are mounted onto that, that's called a PCBA. Typically, right now what is happening is the PCBAs are getting imported. They're getting assembled into the body of the phone, and then you put in the charger and the battery, you do your test setups and all that stuff. But hopefully before the advent of the next financial year, we'll be able to mount those components on the PCB here locally in India, which is actually what we call popularly as the CKD, or the completely knockdown kits being imported. Everybody keeps talking about challenges, and I'm sure challenges are there for all the countries, but all the countries who actually come to this level of manufacturing has been able to do that by the sheer cooperation with the government and the industry, and that's something we also look forward to. So 5 years back, whenever you used to talk about fabs, people used to say there is no production which is happening, and when you wanted to talk to industry about production, they said there was no setup. So with this vision of the government of India, the think tank, what has happened is at least we've kick-started production, and I think it's more a matter of time that the supporting infrastructure also develops. It means as a brand, see, everything can't be done by the brand itself. Let's say Micromax can't start getting into making of the resistors or inductors or the other components, but what is this doing is, because there are perennial and a perpetual demand of the industry now over here, many more, not only Indian, but even foreign companies, foreign component manufacturers have started setting up their facilities over here. This will allow us to take a bigger and a better control of the entire bill of material. See, today, what happens is, I still have my design team, which sits out in China, and the reason of that is compulsion, not a choice. Because most of the semiconductor are first introduced in China, and it takes usually anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks for those semiconductors or any of the new electronics to be brought into India, which typically means if I was set up exclusively in India, I would be running 6 to 8 weeks behind or back of the global competitors that we have. But at the same time, as the Taiwan setup was spoken about, there's a lot of initiatives which are being taken at the industry and the government level in terms of bringing up the manpower or the workforce to become at par with the global competitors, with the global peers. So with all that happening, in our company also it happens where we have very frequent exchange between our China design team and our design team who sits up in Delhi and Bangalore. So all this is work in progress, but I can assure you that over the next 24 months, there's a lot much more which will be visible, both in terms of stats and in terms of job creation, in terms of holding up to the core value of the mobile phone being actually made in India.
Localization of services.
Yeah, just to also talk about one more thing is the size of investment into a single production plant can be anywhere between few hundred crore rupees. So all this positivity which has been shown by the government has also allowed industry to move hand in glove with the government and actually mark up those investments to actually go ahead and realize the vision of getting 100% made in India component product. But at the same time, what's also important is this has also allowed us to move a lot more into very India-centric services. I mean, we all talk about financial inclusion. We are today in this era of so-called demonetization. We are again talking about electronic money and a lot of these payment companies like MobiKwik, Paytm, UDO and all, bringing up these electronic currency in the hands of a normal average Indian consumer. All this would not have been possible if we would have been churning our designs from, let's say, China and Taiwan, because what happens over there is more of the global play. The ability for the local companies to prosper and develop a local solution. I mean, I'm really pleased to have Web over here, who's also a partner from a multilingual company. And what we've seen is when we are putting the multi-language software onto our mobile phones, 85%, no less than 85% of the consumers are actually opting one of those multiple language solutions. So which means typically if this was all, let's say, cooked somewhere in China and Taiwan and brought to India, we would have actually left behind those 85% people who are today finding a companion in a smartphone just because it's more relational to them. So all this, from the strategy perspective, is only helping India to become more united, and is helping not only, what we spoke and talked about over here was the bill of material and the, obvious advantage that will be coming from the bill of material, but just look at the allied industries, all the allied infrastructure which is growing, as Sir also, rightly pointed out, for India to be, those few hundred million or billion people to be on the broadband. We all agree it's going to be mobile broadband, it's not going to be wired broadband. Obviously, the capex requirement of the wired broadband versus the ROI which comes up is far more delayed, and hence mobility is the way to go. In today's world, the mobile phone has become a true companion. As ma'am also pointed out, it's become a companion which is helping you lead a life. It's no longer good living, it's actually a means of living. There's so much we're doing on the mobile phone.
Thank you so much, Vikas. Great thoughts. Much appreciated. Maybe I can go to Parag now. And Parag is representing Qualcomm here, and it's one of the world's largest mobile technology solutions provider. So my question for you, Parag, are twofold. One, what in your opinion is the most critical step or steps required to transform India into a global manufacturing hub? And second, our research shows that semiconductor components such as chipset contributes to almost half of the smartphone costs. Now, for these high value components, how do you localize value being generated in India? What are the steps do you think the manufacturing ecosystem can take up and usher so that the high value components also get localized in India?
Thanks, Jonathan. So you are right that the PCBA constitutes a very large proportion of the overall cost of the mobile phone, and the components which go into the PCBA require complex manufacturing facilities, and I agree with you, it kind of becomes a big issue. And we already had tried once to kind of put a fab manufacturing facility in India. Because of the investment that is required to build such facilities, it has basically not taken off that much. But the main point here is that in order for any facility to take up, right, which is of that high value nature, you need to have some local demand, right? You can't really manufacture these high value components in India and then export it into China for the whole thing to get assembled in China. Right? So we need to take steps as the report point, and your report very clearly points out that it has to be a stage by stage approach. First, we have to create demand in India, and the assembly of these components has to happen in India for any such demand to get created. Fortunately, the know-how, right, of designing PCBA and chips, Qualcomm has a lot of experience. And I would like to basically say that as far as India is concerned, we have the largest workforce outside the United States, stationed in India, right, in Bangalore and Hyderabad, and they are doing chip designing, right? And you can very proudly say that phones that are being consumed in India, right, are designed in India. So when we talk about going to Taiwan to learn design capabilities, we in Qualcomm has a lot of in-house expertise in India, right, to able to support companies, to come up to speed, to compete with global counterparts. So that capability exists, and we want to leverage that. The basic problem that we see is the government policies, right, has to be fine-tuned in order to incentivize people to make investments in India into these high-end activities. And that is where the biggest support is required, right? Unless that happens, then we will not be able to kickstart the growth.
You want to elaborate a bit on what kind of government policies would kickstart the incentives ecosystem that you just mentioned?
Right. So if you see today, as far as the incentive structure that exists, so there is a cost barrier of around 10%, right, which is being bridged by duty differential, right, which the government has created from the point of view of phones that are assembled in India, then the CPU units are being imported out of India. Now that only distinguish between the CPU unit, the completely built unit, and the assembly at the SKD level. If the government can create a little bit more incentive and drill it down to the level of PCBA, then what happens is that there are incentives which can be clearly established from the point of view of doing the assembly in India, and then the whole thing will kickstart. I would like to basically point out, apart from the government policy part, right, which is simple to understand, I would like to also point out that, and before I elaborate further on that, one thing basically missed my attention is the fact that why it is important to design phones and manufacture phones in India, right? And because probably we'll elaborate on that we can get better control on quality, right? As you pointed out about that. The quality part is very significant, and if the manufacturers are able to do the assembly of PCB in India, they can control the quality of the phone end to end, which becomes very difficult, right? If some external companies are manufacturing the phone outside India. So that's what I basically wanted to talk about.
Thank you so much for that. Devashish, thank you for patiently waiting with us. I have a wish list to request from you. So what do you think are the top 3 bottlenecks to this approach, the phased approach to making India also value in the context of mobile phone markets? And where do you think some key policy reforms can happen as you work with Hansina? If you can share some thoughts in the context of the mobile phone markets in India. And you have been patient and quiet, so any general thoughts also here would be most appreciated.
Thank you for inviting me. I feel privileged to be here. If you look at Make in India from the perspective of mobile manufacturers, I feel the mobile manufacturers has embraced Make in India to the fullest with the kind of investments they made. The appeal of Prime Minister fruitful, and they have set up a lot of facilities, and it gone up, as your report says, up to 50. Now, if I say specifically, holistically, the bottlenecks for Make in India, or that could also include mobiles, I would still say that ease of doing business on ground is still one of the bottlenecks. manufacturing has many touch points across, that in its scopes of production. So it still needs to be fine-tuned. Ways of doing business at taxes level, refunds, and all kinds of activities. Because a lot of state governments are attracting investment from mobile manufacturers through financial incentives in terms of VAT refunds, stamp duty reimbursements, and everything. There has to be seamless, process so that they get it without too much of pain, so that a person is not dedicated to look after, VAT refunds from the state governments. It's a cost. Those things needs to be, streamlined. That is the major thing. Second, I would say that, infrastructure, all-round development of infrastructure is the second biggest bottleneck. We are developing an electronics manufacturing cluster at Bhiwadi. Now, ELSINA was the association which floated the idea of EMC to DIT sometime in 2010-11 time frame. Then the brokers there said, why don't you set up a cluster yourself first? So our members were very enthusiastic, said, okay, we'll set up the India's first greenfield EMC. We went around for land, we went to UP, we went to Haryana, we went to Rajasthan. We felt that, that Bhiwadi would be the best suited, looking at industrial environment and the prices, connectivity, etc., etc. So we went there. After the land was allotted, getting possession of land was a big task for us. It took us 9 months to get the possession of the land. Our members paid 11 crore to Rajasthan government report, and we were eligible for allotment of land. After that, we found, when we went there to take possession, that there is some disputes on the land that Rajasthan government acquired. It took us 9 months to push the machinery that kindly, settle the problem of the farmers. They have not paid their compensation to that. They allocated land to us, took money from us. And they have been sending us demand notes saying that, you guys are defaulted, you are not paying your money. So, how one can do, unique in India? Absolutely, sometimes you feel like, what you are doing. So, this is, again, from an association thinking that, okay, we will develop infrastructure is something that we shouldn't have gotten bought into. It's best for state governments to establish the infrastructure, and our members should have gone there and taken up land. But we have done it, we are going ahead with it. We'll do that activity. But it's a pain for the industry. Had the industry got a dedicated electronic zone there, and 15-20 of our members were invested, could go there and set up infrastructure from tomorrow. That would have been, the icing on the cake. But that didn't happen. I would say the third bottleneck is the system. The system needs to be sensitized. They are out of tune with the development narrative. You see, bureaucrats like Mr. Amitabh Kant at the helm of affairs, they are driving it. They are driving the Making in India initiative. But when you look at machinery at the bottom or along the line, you find a lot of trouble. So system has to be sensitized. I think these are the three primary bottlenecks. One good thing that happened is the Department of Electronics IT has been, upgraded to a ministry. This is one good thing for the industry. My personal belief is this electronic industry needs a dynamic ministry of the likes of Piyush Goyal or a Suresh Prabhu. We need a technocrat to drive electronics. A distinguished IAS officer told me, what your members are doing, are they into manufacturing ACs and refrigerators, then it is, good cluster. It's not a good cluster if only then, they manufacture ACs and refrigerators. The guy who does, PCBA for Micromax and, Foxconn and others, they are doing an awesome job. So that is the sensitization level that one has to look at, you know. So I feel it's good that, you know, we need definitely a good minister for electronics, who really can spend time, understand electronics, what is value addition is all about. If you talk about value addition, it's absolutely impossible for someone to understand value addition who's not into manufacturing. So again, value addition is very important. We are doing very low. At Elsina, many of our members do a lot of value addition. We have been, you know, pushing for a lot of value addition locally, and that should happen. But, you know, that makes the mobile industry successful. I would say that my appeal would be to the ecosystem, the manufacturers, as well as the government, that we should be focused on our commitment to Make in India. And the Make in India, when I say, I mean the phased approach that we have been talking about, you mentioned. I think there was some discussion at the IT also already. There is a roadmap for electronics and mobile manufacturing. And I think we need to, you know, as an ecosystem, all of us should be, you know, committed to that. So that's my take. And I would again compliment that, you know, all the mobile manufacturers are doing an awesome job. I think 100 million phones create about a lakh of jobs. So more you produce, the more jobs are created. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Josh. I think we will open up for some questions. You have been patiently hearing us. So why don't we take some questions from all of you?
Both IM as well as Counterpoint has come out with the phase-wise approach till 2020. But what is it that you are asking from the government? That part is missing. Now, how do we reach that 1 lakh extra jobs and 1 million indirect jobs? Because if you're talking about phase 1, you're talking about 6 to 17% of localization happening. Out of that, we have achieved only 6%. And slowly you come to what we can say 35% that you're talking about in phase 3. My concern is, government has done X amount. What is that Y amount that needs to be done by 2020 or in the recent budget of 2017, which will be presented in February, so that industry can move forward at a faster pace and achieve their goals. So let the government do their job, the industry do their job, and the rest of the things will happen. So I wanted to know what the government should do, which is the missing part in this entire story.
Well, if you see the report, we have a specific recommendation section where we try to take an attempt at the Y part that you just mentioned. I think there are 3 aspects to this, and I would like Tarun and me also to chime in a paragraph. First, you have to believe in the idea that 30% localization is important for technological independence. Unless you believe in that idea, you continue to incur a high import bill from foreign manufactured phones. And just like our dependence on the oil import bills, we will continue to be dependent on foreign manufactured phones on that. So the belief is, a behavioral belief change is extremely important, which is why somewhat echoed with some of the thoughts that Devashi said. The second thing is, of course, at the macroeconomic level, so the import duty structure has to change. We saw that states are right now running a horse race with each other in terms of their specific VAT-based or other incentives to woo manufacturers and set up plants. What can be done in terms of not just competition but also maybe co-opetition? So can one state share knowledge with another to create a larger pie? That's something, a framework for that may be useful for a larger localization and value addition in the economy. And the third is about jobs. So a lot of discussion when, as an economist, and also I know that when regulators are chatting with the industry people, the big concern is this phased approach, will it generate jobs? 1.5 lakhs is what we are estimating, and there are indirect jobs. But the point is the nature of the jobs that will be created. So it will be, today, 80% of the jobs are unskilled in this sector. To move from here to a scenario where 80% are skilled jobs, I think there's a lot of catchment pool we can target, and we can use them better, especially in a slowing global economy. and that can actually help us in capturing the value that's available, mainly because the demand is available. Because there is demand, we are in a unique spot where we are not just able to show value from the supply side, but also from the demand side as to how these smartphones can help us. Tarun, please, you want to chat in?
I would like to just add, when you asked the specific question on policy, right, I probably was not very clear on that. This was a government is concerned because let's understand what is happening today. The reason the manufacturing is happening in other countries compared to what it is happening in India is because there is a benefit to the manufacturer, the brand, right, from a cost point of view to continue in that particular direction. So what it basically means is that if you invest in India to bring those manufacturing processes which are happening in India into India, there is a difference of cost, right, which needs to be bridged, which means that the government has to give tax incentive, right? There has to be some kind of incentive either in terms of custom duty or in terms of other taxes to able to promote local value add. Unless you do that, there is no way for anybody to get motivated to basically start doing manufacturing in India. So that is very critical. The biggest point here which I wanted to basically say from a tax incentive point of view is the change in taxation structure which is going to happen going forward with GST coming in. Now with GST coming in, there is a lot of confusion, right? We really don't know what the final structure would be in place because it's a different taxation structure altogether from what we have seen. In the earlier taxation structure, what we have basically have seen is, or what we have experienced is, that whatever you pay at the custom duty point is the cost which the manufacturer has to basically experience or the importer has to experience, and it is basically getting passed on to the consumer with the cost. Whereas in case of GST, it's a value-added tax structure, starting from the beginning, from the custom point till the end. If anybody does not pay GST in the middle part of the overall chain, the consumer will have to pay anyway, right? Because it's a value-added system. So therefore, we need to come out with some kind of innovative structure, right, to compensate the manufacturers, who is sitting between the chain and has an impairment from the point of view of all the processes he is wanting to bring in India, right, which is currently in China, so that he can get compensated, right? And how he can get compensated is a very critical discussion, because I have no clarity at this point. I don't know, because if you have clarity, you can actually talk about it. But that is very, very critical. And unless that happens, it is going to be very difficult.
And I just want to build on Parag's point, something else struck my mind now. Some of the thoughts that he shared are most probably going to incentivize value addition and localization in short to medium run, 5-year period. But as an economist, I would like to think of what will happen in the next 20-year period. And as a Micromax learns by doing value addition here, localizing here, I think they will generate IP. And that IP needs to be protected. And we need to have an environment and architecture in the context of mobile phone market standards, intellectual property, such that they can go and become, just like we see a Xiaomi have IP today, not just a Samsung. We want to make sure that Micromax and others also have IP that can enable them to become global manufacturers, not just Indian manufacturers, so they can go into their export markets as well. So that's something also I think what is worth for the government to think about.
Yes, I have a question, that as far as telecom industry is concerned, there are two Indias, that are living side by side. One of them is the person who has 2 or 3 premium high-end models, for example, like Apple, Samsung, he has got 2 or 3 different operators. For him, there is no issue. There is other India which is living, for whom, there are issues of call drops. When the call drops, issue of call drops. When the Jio does not succeed, the entire industry gets, tainted, Then there is artificial intelligence and IoT, which is going to gain traction, because this hardware infrastructure is getting saturated. So much of the growth is going to come from that end. And then there is no 4G infrastructure, in India, vendors, for example, like Huawei in China, which can, work side by, which can, basically collaborate with the Indian, OEMs, So how do you look at that? Because India is, because the entire this telecom industry depends a lot more on the entire ecosystem, entire chain, rather than simply on hardware and that.
I would like Neil maybe to share some thoughts here. But I do want to say that sometimes you get too caught up in the heterogeneity that India presents to us. 2 India, 3 India, multiple Indias. But I think the story is that you have to disaggregate yourself and think about the big picture. There is not just one India icon. I mean, there are success stories in other contexts where one India has presented a unified vision. But being specific to the mobile phone market, if you have anything to say here.
Thanks for the question. So, if you talking about 2 India, actually there are no 2 India. If you look at the overall mobile phones sold, right, almost 85% of phones are still sold below $150 price points. And if you talk about the premium, it is just 4% of the market. So it's not a big, huge market, premium market. So there is no difference between the consumers. Everyone is price conscious. Everyone wants good value for their product, even if it's a 60K phone or a 10K phone or a 5K phone. But your point is right. Then the next growth engine would be artificial intelligence, IoT. But for that to happen, we have to first reach the first stage, which is empowering everyone with a smartphone and broadband. And until we have that infrastructure, we won't be able to reach the AI or IoT level. So we are still way behind on AI and IoT, and it won't happen until 2025, right? And you rightly make the point that we don't have any infrastructure vendors. Similarly, US also does not have any infrastructure vendor. It's mostly just 3, Huawei, Nokia, and Ericsson, right? And Nokia and Ericsson are mostly Europe, and China, we have ZTE and Huawei, right? So we need to have a global infrastructure player, but first of all, we don't have that much intellectual property, because all these 4 companies, they have invested a lot in intellectual property over the decades to build that expertise of infrastructure. And if we don't have an intellectual property, as Parag said, if we don't have an intellectual property environment, right, then we won't be able to reach that. So this is the first step. First, we have to start building a smartphone and intellectual property in-house, and then we take the next step of thinking about infrastructure and other artificial intelligence software side of things.
I had a small query from Devashish. And Neil as well as Arun talked about PCB and PCBA, and even Vikas said that he is importing those. For PCB and PCBA to be successful, it is all dependent on you people, Elsina and the Bhiwadi factory. So what is the update, and have you started manufacturing, or it will still take some more years for the manufacturing to start? So that, or what is the update, and when do you see component level manufacturing for the so many clusters of manufacturers who are setting up the factory there?
Okay. Now, first to address your question about PCB and PCBA, in the last previous budget, Government of India announced a 10% production subsidy for the manufacturers who are doing PCB manufacturing in India. I think that's a huge amount, and it's a big incentive for anyone to set up PCB manufacturing in India. Assembly activity is going on. It will continue. We do have a lot of manufacturers in India who's doing PCBA. We do have a thriving EMS market. Many of you have heard about EMS earlier, I'm sure. That's the PCBA that we're talking about. So I would say, it's strong, it's active. The PCB industry is there already. We need to have more PCB manufacturers to come in, and then that will bridge the gap in the value addition that we are talking about. Now, coming to Bhiwadi cluster, we are currently in the, we got the possession of the land in January, so we are currently in the process of developing the basic infrastructure there. When we say basic infrastructure, it means it's a barren agricultural land. Then we are setting up roads, drainage, grading, electricity, telecom. All this kind of activities are going on. Some of our members are likely to start setting up their own passive infrastructure, maybe in Jan-Feb of next year. And our estimate is that it's a Government of India funded project, wherein if I want to elaborate slightly, Government of India, the DITI, now we call MITI, is giving about 50% of the development cost, and 50% is being borne by the members. Members do pay their land cost separately. There is no incentive there. So the development cost has been paid now. In the cluster, it's kind of a DLF housing and a DDA. So that is the difference. So you can go out. When we are up and running by the end of next year, around this time we should be up and running with all the infrastructure ready. Some of our members should set up their factories, and we are looking at December 2017 to kickstart operation. Our estimate is, the Elsina cluster would be the first EMC in India which will kick off. There are about 15 other clusters in India. Some of them doesn't have investors there. They have their infrastructure ready. They are waiting for the investors to come. Bhopal, which has been started about 3 years back, has got 2 companies started operation there. But we would see kind of a bit more mushrooming of operations, and hopefully we might be able to invite all of you for the formal inauguration sometime December next year at Bhiwadi. Thank you.
Any other questions, or are we all hungry? Yeah, please.
Out of these 40 manufacturers, how many are Chinese and how many are Indian? And who is driving the localization? Yeah.
So if we look at last 2 years, 50 units have come up, almost 10% are Chinese and 10% Taiwanese. Most of the investment is being driven by local Indian brands. And if we look at the total capex involved in all these 50 units in the last 2 years, it has been close to 2,000 crores, which is still a significant number to start with. And going by the brands who will drive going forward, we can look into some of the Indian brands like Micromax, Lava, Intex, and then we have the Chinese brands which have been getting momentum in the last couple of quarters, like we have Oppo and Vivo coming up here. So yes, you will see more such participation from the Chinese counterparts and the Taiwanese in coming years. It all depends on the recommendation we have put in the report, like how we attract more and more component players to set up the deals here in India.
And about Samsung, which has the lion's share in the market,
Yes, so Samsung is there for almost a decade, so their level of manufacturing is pretty advanced. So we have already SMT process. They have close to 32 assembly lines operational, and they are one of the only player along with a couple of others who are doing SMT here in India. So from assembly to the SKD to SMT line, we can see this operation by next year. And there are some of the components which we have highlighted in the phased approach, like we have housing, we have chargers, batteries. We can see some investments kicking in there to make sure that we move from the 6% to the 17% in coming 2 years.
And what is our export from? Export.
Yes, good question. So if you look at the number in terms of number, last year we had, this year we are estimating almost 180 million phones to be sold here in India, but export contribution is extremely low. It's close to 3 million units. We had almost 107 million exports at one time when Nokia and Samsung was there. That was 2012 when it peaked to 107 million units. So that has declined to almost 3 million. So not only imports and the domestic manufacturing, we have to look from the export angle point of view. So since that 80 billion components
I think we can wrap up. Thank you very much, everybody, for your questions and patience.